My name is John Silvester. I'm a reporter with the Age newspaper. Some people call me Sly of the Underworld. There are 5 million crime stories in the naked city, and this is one of them. Just a note, this is part 2 of a 2-parter. Make sure you listen to part 1 first, which is entirely logical. Sol is universally known as a good guy, except for one crooked cop who still holds a grudge. And there's no doubt his easy manner has led many crooks to confess to him.
The killer is telling us exactly how he did it, why he did it, the lead up to it, and it's all fitting in perfectly with the known facts.
When he was nominated and awarded the Australia Police Medal, the testimonies including the following. From prosecutor Michelle Williams SC, he has always been approachable, astute, dedicated, honest, and completely committed to the task at hand. I've always been impressed by Sol's affable and quiet determination. His compassion for victims has enabled them to have more faith in the system. Detective Superintendent Paul Sheridan wrote, Detective Sergeant Solomon has made a significant contribution to the solution of violent crime within Victoria as an investigator and a leader of investigators. Detective Inspector Gavin Ryan. His demeanour is a great investigative tool, together with a determined, passionate but unintrusive attitude that he uses to quietly persuade witnesses and suspects to tell the truth. For Solomon, one of the highlights was hearing a killer confess, not to him in a Melbourne interview room, but interstate in an elaborate undercover sting. It was the murder of Annette Stewart, 29, who was found in March 1992, strangled with a cord from her iron in her Geelong West home.
Described by the judge as a danger to women, Darren John Chalmers will likely die in jail. He murdered Annette, a young mum, in her Geelong West home.
His most bizarre case involved not circumstantial, but circumcised evidence.
Yeah, a human penis in the women's toilet at Flinders Street Railway Station.
It would lead to a cannibal who used a knife and a wok to deadly effect. On the orders of an Asian crime boss based in London, 2 brothers from America abducted Lee Ann Tuan, 21, who was to be used as a ransom over an extortion attempt on his mother.
We have a kidnapping that has gone horribly wrong.
The discovery of the body would lead Solomon to investigate a crime syndicate with links in America, Britain, Australia, Vietnam, Hong Kong and China. So it must have been incredibly emotional because you were part of Lorimer Task Force, which was the investigation into the murders of 2 police officers, Rod Miller and Gary Silk, who were killed at Cochrane's Road, Moorabbin, in 1998. So you would have arrived at the scene at some point, I imagine?
Again, we were the on-call crew that night. Charlie Bazzina was our senior sergeant, and we got the call. And I arrived at the scene shortly after 2 o'clock in the morning. There was already a command post set up in Warrigal Road.
Gary's dead. Rod's been taken to hospital with fatal injuries and he dies on the operating table.
Correct. Gary was still at the scene, lying there on the nature strip in Cochrane's Road. Rod was at the Monash Medical Centre, Monash Hospital, undergoing surgery. Yeah, it was a pretty horrific sight to see.
How do you keep your emotions under control in a case when it's colleagues and there would have been so much emotion at the scene as well? How do you just keep it together so you can do your job?
I generally can do it quite easily with most cases. I don't have to sort of think too hard or consciously steel myself. But I remember on that night when I saw Gary, because although I didn't really know him, I I was familiar with him because I used to see him in the building a lot, wandering around and in the elevators, and I knew his name, and he knew my name, and we'd say hello. And to see him in that situation, lying there, dead on the nature strip, with his revolver still in its holster, and I remember I really did have to sort of shake myself and steel myself and try to keep it together, but I managed to.
Police in Victoria have launched a massive manhunt for the person who shot dead 2 Melbourne police officers early today.
Scores of police converged on the area shortly after 12:30 this morning. Amid reports 2 officers had been shot down. Sergeant Gary Silk was pronounced dead at the scene. His colleague, Senior Constable Rodney Miller, who suffered gunshot wounds to the chest, was rushed to Monash Medical Centre where he later died. This morning, late today, a policeman brought flowers, 2 single roses for 2 fallen comrades.
Yeah, well, the backstory being that Gary and Rod were doing some static surveillance work. There was 2 armed robbers who were hitting suburban restaurants, and they'd done a couple of dozen or whatever. So there was this operation where a lot of police were sitting off likely targets, and there was the restaurant Silky Emperor at the corner of Cochrane's and Warragul, and we now know that Gary and Rod pulled up a Hyundai. So the investigation takes a long time. After 12 months, there's a breakthrough where you've got listening devices and whatnot, and 2 people become the star suspects, Bendali Debs and Jason Roberts.
That's right. And that didn't happen until nearly 12 months afterwards. And in that interim period of time, it was a bit like the Hodgson case. We were following up hundreds of pieces of information and working on a number of criminals. It's something to state. Because of so much resource being thrown into that job, we were able to actually determine that in that little area in Moorabbin at around that time, there were all sorts of criminal activities going on. There was a neo-Nazi bikie that was driving around in a stolen car. We got him. There was another dude who was cruising around trying to break into cars. We got him. We had Nick Radev,
Gangland figure who was shot dead.
figure up the road, about 3 k's up the road, doing a $60,000 drug transaction with another couple of crooks. And he was armed at the time with a 38 caliber revolver. It had nothing to do with the Silk Miller, but we got him. We had Peter Gibb, notorious Peter Gibb, who escaped from
the remand centre with Archie Butterley.
With Archie Butterley, a violent and criminal. He happened to be cruising through the area at the time too. We ended up getting him. There was a crew from Sydney down doing drug deals around that area. We ended up going up to Sydney and getting them. There was another crew from South Australia doing stuff in that area. I mean, none of these, they weren't working together. They just happened to be around, and this all came to our attention, and we had to work on them. And they were investigations, large investigations in their own right. We ended up locking up so many offenders during that first 12 months of people that had absolutely nothing to do with the murders, until we finally latched on to Debs and Roberts, who ironically had been spoken to 3 weeks after the job, when their Hyundai was inspected because they'd had a windscreen replaced.
Yeah, because the rear windscreen, there was glass at the scene, so it was believed a shot was either fired in or out.
We knew it was from it was a windscreen from a Hyundai XL vehicle. So we put out the call to all windscreen suppliers to let us know if anybody had come in to replace a windscreen. And we got a call from a windscreen supplier who said, we were getting calls from a number of them, and we were checking out all these Hyundais that had their windscreens replaced. And Deb's daughter's Hyundai was one of them. And they gave us, not me, there was a crew specifically working on the Hyundai. They gave a story as to what happened to the windscreen. It seemed to be plausible. They were kind enough to let us take the car for a few days to forensics to look at. They looked at it at forensics, didn't make any connections to the murder. We gave it back to them and moved on. And it turned out that was the car.
After a 12-month investigation, the armed robbery team that had been pulled up in Cochrane's Road was identified as Bendali Debs and a much younger Jason Roberts. Both were convicted of the murders of the two police officers.
He was jailed along with co-accused Bendali Debs for the murders of police officers Sergeant Gary Silk and Senior Constable Rodney Miller in 1998.
But decades later, it was discovered a police statement relating to the claim that the dying Rod Miller told police at the scene that there were two offenders and one was on foot was not in the prosecution brief. Roberts won a retrial, and this time he said that while he was Deb's armed robbery partner, he was not there on the night, which meant the two police were killed by Debs with two different firearms. In the retrial, Roberts was acquitted and received $1 million in compensation.
Just an extraordinary development in court this morning. Gasps in the courtroom as well as in the newsroom as this verdict came through. That there is Jason Roberts. He's spent the past 22 years
Jason Roberts, not guilty of the murders of two Victorian police officers in 1998. Live now to...
You and Lorimer must have been absolutely devastated at the retrial.
Oh, totally. We were. We couldn't believe that the jury had come to that particular verdict. And what struck me also was the speed at which they'd reached the verdict. I mean, the retrial went for nearly 6 weeks, possibly longer. Well, it felt like 6 months because I was there most days, and there was so much evidence for them to have to consider. Just all the listening device conversations alone, and also there was more evidence presented at the retrial than there was at the first trial. And now we had Debs giving evidence for the prosecution, yet they come back with a verdict. Look, I can't remember. I think it was about 2 days or something. It was just, we couldn't believe that the jury had reached that verdict.
They didn't like Debs' evidence, and
I don't know, John. I don't know what they thought. I mean, they seemed to accept Jason Roberts' evidence that he gave on oath that he was doing all these armed robberies with Bendali Debs for 3 months, holding up restaurants all over Melbourne, and they worked together and they did it the same way every time. And his job was to tie people up and control the customers whilst Debs removed the money and all that. This went on for 3 months. Yet on that particular night, he gave evidence that he and his fiancée have gone to a Chinese restaurant in Endeavour Hills for a night out, and also to case it to see if it was going to be worth him and Debs going back to rob. And there was hardly anybody in the place, so they leave after their dinner. He reports back to Debs that it's no good, it's not worth it. And then Debs decides to go, all right, well, we'll go and do the Silky Emperor in Moorabbin. And then Roberts just pulls out and says, no, I can't, I don't feel like it tonight. So Debs goes alone to rob the Silky Emperor restaurant, which is a big restaurant, There's a lot of people in there at the time, on his own with 2 guns. And then somehow he manages to shoot 2 trained police officers who were standing at different positions with 2 guns.
So a long time later, you actually sneak up to Goulburn Prison in New South Wales.
Yes.
To see Debs because he's been convicted of a murder up there and another murder down here. But so why'd you go and see Deb?
Well, he's been convicted of a murder down, 2 murders in Victoria. He was convicted of Christy Harty, a young 17-year-old girl that he shot dead in about a year before Gary Silk and Rod Miller. And he'd also been convicted of the murder of a young woman in Sydney, in a suburb of Sydney. And he was serving life with no parole. He's never getting out of prison. So working on the cold case crew, my management, my boss said, how about we make an approach to him and see if he'll talk about any other unsolved murders he may have been involved in Victoria, and we can pitch to him that you've got nothing to lose now, you're never getting out, and try and get him to open up and discuss these other cases that if he wants to or doesn't, we've got nothing to lose. So I did. I went up to see him with another detective, Justin Tippett, just cold. We just called up there cold. He didn't know we were coming. And I wasn't expecting him to even talk to us. But fortunately, we got him on a good day, and the opening lines were good. And he started to talk, and we sat down with him for probably 3 hours. He had nothing to say. Well, he said he hadn't been involved in any other murders. He's serving prison time now for all the murders that he's done, so he had nothing to give us. And we did speak about the outcome of the retrial, and he was pretty annoyed at it and pretty angry at the verdict, and he couldn't believe it.
Because he said that their jobs needed 2 gunmen.
Yeah.
And what was Robert's role? What did he say?
He was the person who controlled the customers, and if they needed tying up or restraining, that was Roberts's role.
And Jason Roberts, well, he received a large amount of government compensation, and you and I might think he's a lucky man, but in the eyes of the law, he was acquitted and he's an innocent man, and will remain so. But it's not all gangland stuff, because you worked cold case, and we've actually dealt with a couple of pretty devastating crimes, but I want to talk about a big win. So you've got a cold case, which is Annette Stewart.
Correct.
Tell us about that particular.
Annette Stewart, she was a young woman that lived in Geelong West, and she was found in March 1992. She had been struck about the head. She had severe head injury. She was lying on her bed, and she had been strangled with an extension cord, an electrical extension cord, which was still wrapped around her throat and anchored to the bedpost. And she was lying there on the bed, sort of spread eagled out on the bed.
He murdered Annette, a young mum, in her Geelong West home in 1992 before killing his
It was a particularly brutal murder, and it was investigated very thoroughly by the first homicide crew back in 1992, and no suspects were really identified, and the case went cold for many years until $1 million reward was offered for information in relation to the murder. This is around 2019 or 2018, 2019. $1 million reward was posted, and someone called in and gave some information, pretty much giving like second-hand hearsay. Basically, I can't recall the specifics now, but it was along the lines of he was told by someone who was told by the brother of the killer who was responsible. So it was kind of like second-hand information. That came in, was looked at. As a result of that information, and the killer's name was given as Darren Chalmers.
He was already in the file.
Yes. When the cold case team got that information, of course, they recover all the boxes from archives, go through the file, and lo and behold, this Darren Chalmers was in the file and had already been interviewed by Homicide Squad detectives, the original investigation, and made a statement. Basically, the story was that on the day that Annette was murdered, she was at home during the day and she was having some trouble with her television antenna. So she called a friend to come down to see if he could fix it. So the friend rocks up and brought these other two guys with him. One of them was this Darren Chalmers. And they were there for about 45 minutes and they managed to get the TV working. And Darren Chalmers had never been to the house before, didn't know Annette. He just was tagging along with the friend and the other guy. So they all leave. That's what the original homicide crew were told about Darren Chalmers. So they interviewed him, the other two guys. They all made statements. Their statements were consistent with one another, and there was no. And the Homicide Squad even went to the trouble of actually going to Chalmers' place. They didn't have a search warrant, but he was cooperating, and they had a bit of a look around, and there was nothing there of any incriminating nature. So they took him at his word, and that was it. He was never looked at again. Well, after we got this new information that he had allegedly told his brother, and his brother told someone, and that someone told the fella who was ringing up Crime Stoppers after the reward was announced. We pulled the file back in, and the lead investigator noticed that there was some hairs that had been collected by the original crime scene people, just hairs that hadn't been examined yet. So they went off to forensics for DNA examination, mitochondrial DNA examination. And the results came in that Darren Chalmers' hair can't be excluded as the hair that was found on Annette's body.
Do you remember why Chalmers' DNA was in the system?
It was on the database in Western Australia, apparently, but not in Victoria.
Sure.
Yeah, but it was on the system in Western Australia. So that's interesting. So then we touch base with our Western Australian counterparts at the Homicide Squad over there, just to find out if they know anything about this Darren Chalmers, because he'd been living in Western Australia for quite a while. And they tell us that they're looking at him on suspicion of having something to do with the disappearance of a woman that lived in his street in a suburb called Medina near Perth. That this woman, Diane Barrett, had just vanished, and he was, I think, the last person to have had any contact with her. So they were looking at him as a person of interest. Well, then when we told them about our reason for interest in him, we decided that we'd join forces and do a joint operation on him. And we did. And we commenced a covert investigation utilising undercover operatives, which went for about 4 months, which I'm not going to go into the detail of. But as a result of that operation with undercover operatives, he confessed to the murder of Diane Barrett in Western Australia, and they recovered her remains.
Were you listening to the confession?
Yes, I was.
Wow. So
I
you're
was
actually
there.
hearing your man.
Yes, I was there.
And you're with the WA police?
There was myself, my lead investigator from Cold Case, Homicide Victoria, and the crew from Western Australia Homicide that were working on the Barrett case, and a host of other detectives. We were monitoring the conversations. And yeah, he first confessed to the Barrett case and then to the killing of Annette Stewart.
Well, first off, if people don't understand the commitment, you told me that when he's confessing to the WA job, you looked at the investigator and he was crying.
He was. He was in tears. He was in tears. Tears of joy and relief.
A double murderer who killed women decades apart and in different states will likely die in jail.
Described by the judge as a danger to women, today Annette Stewart's loved ones finally watched as her killer was handed a second life sentence.
Nearly 32 years we've been waiting for this result. It's hard to describe the relief that it is ended.
And it's interesting because often we both know there have been occasions where police forces are only really interested in their own job. So they've got what they want. They've got the confession, and you're a bit frightened that was going to be case closed.
I was, because the case they were working on was a fairly high-profile case over there at the time, and there was a lot of pressure on them to solve it, find that woman, and her family, of course, needed to know where she was and what had happened to her. So I thought, if they arrest him now and charge him, that'd be because he hadn't yet confessed to Annette Stewart. I said, if they close this down now, that's the end of us. But to their credit, they didn't. They persevered with it. Came back another day and engaged with him over Annette Stewart and got the confession out of him for Stewart.
How did you feel listening?
It was, I've never felt so much joy. It was just a combination of joy, relief, pride, and amazement that we're getting a confession from the mouth of a killer for a job that happened over 30 years ago,
and actually listening to it. I mean, we can put together the evidence and come up with our theories as to what happened and why it happened and who did what, but at the end of the day, you're relying on interpreting the evidence properly. But here you have it from the horse's mouth, so to speak. The killer, he's telling us exactly how he did it, why he did it, the lead up to it, and it's all fitting in perfectly with the known facts. And now we're going to be able to go and speak to her family and tell them we've got him. And what happened to him?
He was first dealt with in Western Australia for the murder of Diane Barrett, because he was in their jurisdiction, and he pleaded guilty to that and was sentenced to, I think, 20 years imprisonment. And then after that, and there were no appeals, that didn't take all that long actually. It took about 18 months for all of that to be sorted through. Then after that, we used the process of the interjurisdictional prison transfer. We got him brought to Victoria, where I charged him with the murder of Annette Stewart. He pleaded guilty to that, and he was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 36 years. And he'll be serving that here in Victoria. So he'll do at least 36 years before even being considered for parole.
So we've covered gangland, we've covered a number of things, but there are cases in your background, Sol, that are pretty bizarre and sort of, I've covered a lot of murders, but not that many involving a cannibal. So, and particularly the first piece of evidence was pretty compelling.
Yeah, well, I've worked on a lot of cases over the years, but this particular case would have to go down as one of the most bizarre cases and macabre cases I've ever worked on. And it all started. It was back in 1988 or 89 when a woman found in the women's toilets at Flinders Street railway station a human penis.
Now, at this point, I would usually make a bad joke, but considering the world we live in, I'm just going to let you keep talking.
Yeah. Yeah, a human penis in the women's toilet at Flinders Street railway station. Homicide squad.
Best I've found is a Mikey card, but
homicide squad notified, and the decision was made that a single human penis isn't enough to kick off a homicide investigation.
Oh, please. Oh, truly.
So,
if it's been a human head, what do you say? He's got a migraine.
Yeah, I'd say if it was a human head, yes, but unfortunately, the penis didn't cut it with management, so it was left with. It was left with
the person who made that decision was not Dick Tracy.
It was left with the local detectives to follow up, and so we didn't get involved in it initially, and it was run by a detective from City West CIB. I think his name was Bruce Fleming, and he did a terrific job. He worked his guts out on that, and after a while, he managed to identify who the penis belonged to, and it all came about because a particular individual had written a letter to someone in New Zealand, and in that letter, he had described how he had killed a Korean and cut his penis off.
That's pretty good evidence.
Yes. So now we had a suspect, and we knew who the victim was, and it was a Korean national who was just staying in Melbourne, had befriended this individual. His name was David Phillips, and David Phillips took him to where he was staying, which was a disused warehouse at 167 Normanby Road in South Melbourne, and they had an argument over something, and Phillips ended up stabbing him to death in that disused warehouse. And then over 3 or 4 days, cut him up, cooked him in an open fire, and ate parts of his flesh. And the detective from City West CI who did all the work, when he came back with this information, I got involved then, and I was involved in interviewing the offender and also going down to the warehouse. And we recovered parts, human remains, some bones and some muscle tissue. But I'll never forget when we were interviewing Phillips, he was describing how he sliced off parts of the thigh, cooked it on a wok, and ate it, and it was very sweet, he said. It was something like straight out of Hannibal Lecter and Silence of the Lambs.
Well, I can tell you that this podcast is not going to be sponsored by Tourism Victoria, saying come to Australia, come to Victoria and end up in a wok.
Yeah, well, he was charged. He was charged with murder, but he was pretty quickly declared to be mentally ill and found not guilty on the ground of severe mental illness, and went off to the mental institution down at Ararat. And I don't know what became of him after that.
Well, he won't be working in the kitchen, that's for sure.
Yeah, so that's probably one of the most bizarre cases I've ever worked on. But, full credit to the detective from City West CI who never gave up on it.
Another bizarre tale in Naked City. This is the moment where I gratuitously ask for positive reviews that we can put on Apple or Spotify. This is to suck other people in to listening to it. One more, which was one that always fascinated me. Back in 96, a young man is seen to be abducted at Glen Waverley. A neighbour sees it, and it becomes an amazing international job where an abduction's ordered out of the UK by an Asian crime gang, and they've imported a couple of hitmen from Los Angeles. So you were one of the investigators in that. What do you recall of that?
Yeah, well, that was in 1996. I was on Crew 4 under Jeff Maher's leadership, and there'd been a kidnapping that occurred in Glen Waverley in April of 1996, where a very wealthy Vietnamese national who was here in Melbourne at the time visiting her son lived in Glen Waverley with his fiancée. The son had become friends with a family in Springvale who he didn't realise at the time were connected to some very bad people, very serious international organised crime people that were into drug importations, extortion. There was a group of them, and they operated out of Hong Kong. The principal of the syndicate lived in London, and basically their go was large-scale commercial quantity drug importations all around the world, and having an absolute field day importing narcotics into Australia at the time. Well, the son became associated with members of the principal's family who lived in Springvale, but he wasn't aware of any of this. And, of course, he told his friends all about his mother and what she does, and his mother was a very wealthy Vietnamese national who made a living playing all sorts of different money markets and importing and exporting clothing, basically, is what she was doing. So they decided that she might be a good person for them to get into business with, because she could move a lot of their drugs, narcotics, into the country in her shipments of clothing. So they decided that they would set up a meeting with her, the mother, and the principal on the guise that it was a business venture, a legitimate business venture. So the meeting took place in Melbourne at the Regent Hotel where the mother was staying. And in the beginning, it was all about bringing in clothes and shoes, but then later on, the principal disclosed the real nature of the business was drugs, and he wanted her to help him import and export drugs. Well, she refused flatly. Wanted nothing to do with it. But he didn't accept that. The nature of this particular crime syndicate was you don't refuse their demands. Otherwise, there's consequences for you. You just don't refuse them. They get what they want. And she was playing hardball, making it, she's not interested. So, cut a long story short, they then started to extort money out of her. She had to pay them. They put a demand on her to pay them $400,000 because she had refused to go into business with them. And this went on for weeks. Now, we weren't involved in any of this. She wasn't reporting any of this to the police. She was dealing with it by herself. And the threats and the demands were getting more and more intense, to the point where she was flatly told that if she doesn't pay up the $400,000, there's going to be severe consequences for her. And she was stalling them, making out she was going to pay, but she wasn't. So it all ended with the principal offender deploying 2 other members of his group who were from Los Angeles, and the 2 guys from Los Angeles flew in via Sydney, and then they were driven to Melbourne, and I think it was the 29th of April 1996, they went to the victim's address in Glen Waverley. They got into the house. He was grabbed. They made him write a note to his mother saying that I've been taken by so-and-so, by people, and they want their money, and you've got 72 hours to pay. They fought with him, dragged, outside the house. During the scuffle, one of it had a Marlboro cap on it he'd been wearing on his head, and it was dropped and left in the driveway of the victim's house. They got him, they put him in the boot of a car, which was seen by neighbours, and they drove off with him in the boot of the car. And a neighbour took the registration number of the car. And then police were notified by the neighbour, but they came down, saw the note in the house, saw the Marlboro cap, spoke to the witnesses.
There were 2 men beating another man in the stomach, and then a car with the boot open reversed back into the court, and the man that was being hit started crying. He was calling out, "Help, help."
And then, of course, they went to the victim's mother and said, "This is what's happened here, what's going on?" And then that's when she had to reveal what had been going on for weeks, and that she hadn't yet told the police. So he'd been kidnapped, and the ransom was $400,000. So after that, there's communications between her and the kidnappers by phone.
In the UK?
Oh, there was calls to the UK. They were communicating from Hong Kong. Basically, she was told, "We told you what would happen if you didn't pay the money. Now we've got your son. You've got 72 hours to pay. We want it. Pay up. If you pay up, everything will be okay. You'll get him back. If you don't, it's not going to be too good." And this went on for quite a while, and now the Special Response Squad that dealt with kidnappings back then, they were now running the job as a kidnapping for ransom. And it was a big operation, which I won't go into, but they come up with a plan that they would try and get the kidnappers to think that she was going to pay the money. So she was instructed to go to bus stop 31 at Spencer Street and hand over a briefcase which contained the $400,000 to people from the syndicate who was just coming there to collect the money. And she was warned, don't do anything stupid like telling the police, because it's not going to help you. So on the day that the money was to be collected, she went to the location, and then three suspects came down to Melbourne from Sydney to meet her to collect it. But unfortunately, they spotted a couple of unmarked police units around the area. They did some anti-surveillance, and they saw some plainclothes police nearby, and they realised it was a trap. They quickly got on the phone to the principal offender to tell him she's betrayed us, and they were arrested on the spot by detectives, taken back for interview. she had contact with the principal offender who said that you've betrayed us, told you not to do that. That's it. You won't be hearing from us anymore. And they cut contact with her. And the three that were arrested, it turned out that only one of them was actually told to come to Melbourne to collect the money. He just brought these other two dudes with him. That was his story. And whilst he was in custody, he tried to swallow a piece of paper with all these phone numbers. And luckily they recovered the paper out of his mouth, and the phone numbers were the numbers of other people that were involved in the syndicate, which was quite incriminating evidence. And they managed to get that. It had all their numbers, the Hong Kong numbers, the London numbers, but still no idea where the poor victim was at that stage. And the 72 hours elapsed, and money wasn't paid. And about 6 weeks later, the victim was found in a drain, a massive sort of drain underneath an area in Noble Park, like an aqueduct. And his body was just floating through, and it was just seen by some kids. Recovered, and he'd been shot through the head, execution style.
Police divers arrived at the Noble Park drain today, scouring a 2-kilometre stretch near where a man's body was discovered late yesterday. It was partly decomposed. Detectives believe it had been in the drain at least a few days.
Was that of a man kidnapped from outside his Glen Waverley home 6 weeks ago.
Divers 2-year-old Tuan Ann Lee was shot through the head in an execution.
Rescue officers began an arduous line search, carefully combing surrounding
We have a kidnapping that has gone horribly wrong, to the extent that after the kidnappers have not had their demands met, they have killed their victim.
So we've got a cap, a black cap with a red M.
Yeah.
And who would know that was going to be such an important piece of evidence?
Yeah.
So you tell us where that cap came from.
Well, that cap, the cap that was found at the crime scene, at the scene of the kidnapping, we'd already amassed a lot of intel about through those phone numbers and through the telephone intercepts as to who we believe was involved in this. And we identified the principal being from London, but they worked out of a headquarters of theirs in Hong Kong. We had the Hong Kong police working for us. Plus, we identified two brothers from Los Angeles who was part of their syndicate. One of them was a fairly dangerous, ruthless murderer, and his younger brother had less of a criminal background to him. We'd identified the group, and so we knew their names, and we were able to find out that the Hong Kong people were travelling on false passports, as was the principal offender and the other one they're all using false passports. And we were able to connect them to various flights coming into Sydney and Melbourne around that time. And on one of the trips to Australia, not long before the murder, the younger hitman, was travelling with an associate of his, and the associate purchased a carton of Marlboro cigarettes from a duty-free shop at the Los Angeles airport. And the deal was you buy a carton of cigarettes and you got a free cap, a Marlboro cap. And, of course, when you buy duty-free, you've got to show your boarding pass, which gives your name and your seat number and flight number. So we were able to match his name, to the flight coming in and the seat he was sitting in, and the person sitting right next to him was one of the hitmen. They were travelling together. We established they were travelling together.
They were duty-free cigarettes, $65 a carton.
They were. Now, the cap that he dropped off his head, when we examined it for DNA, it had 3 profiles on it. And one of the profiles was the younger hitman. So he had been wearing that cap. So now we had his DNA at the scene of the kidnapping.
So to cut a long story short, the main offender, well, the boss was arrested in London, and I remember one of your blokes, Trigger, went over to get him.
Yep.
And he put the handcuffs on him, and the bloke said that they're a bit tight. And he said, "On your wrist." He said, "No, don't scratch my Gucci watch."
Yeah.
And when they hopped on the plane for to come back, the steward's gone, "Would you like a drink?" And he said, "Yeah, I wouldn't mind a Chardonnay." And Trigger said, "You can have a Coca-Cola like everybody else." And when he came back here, he couldn't speak English, but Trigger reckons he was laughing his head off at all the Benny Hill movies on the plane. But one of the hitmen you found in Vietnam, he was charged with serious drug trafficking.
Yeah, the elder of the two brothers, by the time we got the evidence to arrest and charge all of these people, he was already in prison in Vietnam facing drug trafficking over there.
Do you know what happened to the boy after he was killed? No. Did he read the papers?
And unfortunately, we never got to bring him back to Australia to face charge because he got the death penalty.
And they meant it. He got machine gunned, didn't he?
I'm not sure how it happened, but he was executed, and so was the brother-in-law, who was, by the time we got onto them, he was already in prison in China and for drug trafficking.
And he was executed there.
Yeah. And so we ended up extraditing the principal offender, the ringleader, Hong Trung Phuc.
And they used to call him Brother.
Brother, yeah. He was brought back and stood trial along with his sister from Springvale and the guy who drove the kidnappers around on the day. He was charged, and out of it all, the only person convicted was the principal offender, and he's actually still in prison to this day.
Did he go down for murder?
Went down for murder and kidnapping.
Wow.
His sister, who we charged, there was a hung jury, but there was never a retrial, and the DPP dropped the charges against the driver. It's a massive case, absolute massive case involving law enforcement from the United States, the United Kingdom, Hong Kong, and it was just, people were amazed that we're only a small task force that we put it together and wrapped it all up.
Because the local American police got one of the blokes in on a pretense.
That's right.
And he said he was nervous and he wanted to smoke, and they said, it's a non-smoking police station, but have a cigarette, but make sure you spit on it.
That's exactly right.
To make sure it's out. And
yeah,
he
got the DNA, and we were able to match the DNA, yeah.
An amazing job. So you got a syndicate based in London, working out of Hong Kong, that's got local people in Melbourne, that gets hitmen from Los Angeles, and the homicide squad was able to get law enforcement around the world to assist, and that's actually the template of what we've got to do in the future.
Yeah, and the funny thing was, well, it's not so funny, but I was given the job of going over to California for the extradition of the younger of the two hitmen, and unfortunately, I didn't get to go because when he was arrested over there, a Californian judge or magistrate dismissed the extradition, wouldn't allow it, on the basis that case wasn't strong enough.
Which meant you didn't get to Disneyland.
I didn't get to Disneyland, no.
So you've finally pulled the plug. You've just had your farewell. What's the future going to hold for you?
Well, at the moment, just rest, relaxation, catching up with the grandkids and doing a bit of travel.
It's fantastic, Sol. And one of the beautiful things is we've both seen a lot of people that we both care for deeply who have suffered PTSD from going through a journey similar to you. And whether it's your DNA or whether it's your family life or your outside interests, it appeared to me that you're as enthusiastic and as balanced as you've always been.
Yeah, well, luckily, I'm lucky, I guess. It's never really affected me like that. I've managed to keep it all compartmentalised. I don't know how I do it. I just do it.
Well, I know you told me of one case where, you're actually with a mother as her 3-year-old child who'd been bashed as they turned the life support system off. So that's probably a window into the fact that the homicide detectives aren't just about getting results, but it's a lifelong journey with the survivors as well.
That's right. Yes. Just want to end on this note is that I don't want anyone to think that I'm claiming credit for all of these cases. I mean, I worked with some amazing detectives. I was fortunate enough to have been their team leader and supervisor over many years, but they made me look good, especially the latter years spent at the cold case crew. All the work that we do and all the successes we have, no one person can claim the credit for them. It's a team of hard-working investigators that invest a lot into these cases.
At your farewell, you mentioned that you would drive a detective home and you would tell him many stories of the past, but you reckon you knew when he'd had enough.
Yes, that's right. There was one of the guys I used to drive home once a week. He used to love hearing me tell the stories, but he denies this, of course. But I reckon because we get to a certain area and he just hand me a couple of. He take out his canister of chewies and give me a couple of chewies to put in my mouth to shut me up, I think.
Sol, it's been a pleasure. Thanks very much. This episode is reported by me and produced by a jet, Julia Carr-Katzel, mixing by the ever-reliable Cormac Lally, and our chief button pusher, of course, is Tammy Mills. Thanks to Tom McKendrick and Lisa Muxworthy.